Hi, this is Greg Suttie on soccer, and I'm here with Jacques Ladouceur. Jacques, we've been talking about the book that you're writing, Raising a Professional Athlete. And today we're going to talk a little, last time we spoke about parents to some degree, but today we're going to talk in detail about the parents' involvement in raising their kids in those vital years, early years, and moving forward. You shared with me an interesting term to get this started. What was this term that you have for parents?
Chief Encouraging Officer.
Isn't that huge? So that's the CEO.
That's the CEO.
Wow. So explain the Chief Encouraging Officer.
Well, the Chief Encouraging Officer, basically, you have a title. And because you have a title, I want to help you to understand it, because everywhere in corporate America, we have titles and we have job descriptions. We have a list of things that we have to do. The Chief Encouraging Officer, your title and your job is to encourage your children. And that's the biggest thing, right? So we want to talk about encouragement in different spots, how to do it, and those kind of things.
So as the kid is out there on the field after the game, how important is that encouragement right there on that ride home from the game?
Well, the ride home from the games are very, very important, because it's time where you're spending with your children, you're growing, you're building relationship. Your kids are in a process of development, right? They're not professionals yet. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes there. And what you want to do is really, really focus and encouraging them on the things they do correctly. When you give them positive things, when you give them positive feedback on the things they do correctly, then what happens, they're more encouraged and they're more confident to get out there and do it more and more and more.
So as a parent in the stands watching the game, I think it's kind of natural to sort of focus on the mistakes that the kid has made, but to train your eye as a parent to look at those things of success, those moments of success, those right moves, right turns, good passes, these kind of things that they make, and then to concentrate on those during the conversation.
Yeah, it's very true. And you, as a parent, you also don't, you're in your job description, it's not coaching. Right. So that's why you have a coach. So if you hire a coach, or you as a coach of your son's or your daughter's team, that's his part. So you let him coach that part. But your part as the Chief Encouraging Officer is to encourage your children and to build them up.
Now this goes obviously off the field too. This is something that we're dealing with a 24/7 title.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So this is at home. This is in the supermarket.
Right. Everywhere.
This is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, you're building a professional athlete, right? So when a person who's a professional athlete goes outside, they're not playing in a game, they're not on a court, or they're not on the ice, whatever the case may be, they're still a pro, and their character's still on the line. And that's a big thing. The way people act outside the game sometimes is more important than they actually act inside the game.
So you shared with me a story about a parent that you've recently dealt with in a disciplinary way with the coaching aspect. Could you share that story?
Sure. What happened was I have a couple boys that I've coached, and the parent, they did some real bad things at school, right? So the parent was very unhappy over that.
Wow.
And the parent came to me and says, "Look, these boys, they love playing soccer, and they did some bad things at school today, and I got to find a way to discipline them.
Interesting.
Can you help me do that?" I said, "Well, what would you like to do?" She said, "Well, sit them out." I said, "Well, let's not sit them out the beginning of practice. Let's let them play a little bit, and then let's take them off the field, and then I will tell them why I'm taking them off the field, and then I will also explain to them what they did and the wrong things they did and how they need to behave in school, because they're always on, their character's always on the line."
Now, the parent role here is, they've got to choose that coach. There's an important part of that too, because it's not just a relationship between the coach and the player, but it's also a relationship between the coach and the parent.
Exactly.
So explain a little bit about how that role works.
Well, the big thing when it comes to coaching is parents, right? Because if you look in youth soccer, nobody really talks about that. You have two very unhappy sides. The coaches don't want to deal with the parents, and the parents usually are saying something bad about the coach. So this is kind of the way it goes.
Yeah.
But in reality, for it to work, for it to gel properly, it's a partnership. It's a relationship. You both have the same goal.
Right.
You're both trying to achieve the same thing, because you have a child in the middle both of you want to develop and become better.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have a good relationship together to do that, and it's a partnership. For example, for me, there's a lot of times I have a kid on my team that I'm not getting to for whatever reason, and I need to go communicate with that parent and say, hey, look, you know what? Maybe it's a personality thing. You know, how is he at home? How is he this way?
Right.
Give me some insight on his brain, so that way I can get in there and help him develop.
Right. And that relationship is for the entire period of time that you have that kid on your team. So your relationship with the parent is building as your relationship
Correct.
with the player and the parent is building. And I apologize, the CEO. Because
Chief Encouraging Officer.
The Chief Encouraging Officer, because a parent is an overreaching statement.
Correct.
We all know that we are the parent of our kid. You know, that's something that we get that before
Right.
we even walk in to meet you.
Right.
But what we don't know is that new title that we're going to get
Right.
after we've sat down with the coach.
Correct.
And now we're also the Chief Encouraging Officer.
Correct.
And that role continues on as it goes.
Exactly.
Now, how about a negative side to that?
Well, the negative side to that is very simple. I could give you a very, very clear-cut example. Now, we know in youth soccer, when the kids are a certain age, anywhere between 8 and 16, there's a lot of parent involvement. Well, there is one kid who was very successful. He became a professional at 14.
Wow.
He was very young. Everybody, he was a phenom, right? Everybody talked about it. But what happened is that the parent was not experienced enough to deal with the higher level. He signed a professional contract. He had endorsements and all this kind of thing. So he was playing half the game. The coach was playing him half the game on a professional game at that very young age.
So he was coming in like as a sub at halftime or something like that?
Second half, he played the whole half, and he was doing very well.
Interesting.
Everybody embraced him, everybody loved him, and it was going very well. Until the parent decided to get involved in the whole situation. The parent said to the coach, well, I don't think he's playing enough. He needs more playing time. And she said this over a long period of time, where to the point it irritated the coach and the organization.
No.
And they said, okay, we don't want to deal with this parent anymore, so we're going to trade this individual.
Oh my.
So they trade the kid, and everywhere else he's went, he's bounced around 15 different teams and could never get any playing time. Because they signed him first, they felt an obligation to his development.
This is the original team.
The original team.
Right.
Their whole integrity was on the line.
Right. But the teams that took him up later didn't have that, that obligation.
They didn't.
It was
they
just
didn't
a contract.
They didn't feel it.
Right.
Because they felt it, an obligation to their fans, to the players he's playing with, all those kind of things. But the parent was not experienced enough to understand that. So the parent blew this kid's chances because she went in there and created a conflict between her and the coach and the organization part ways with him.
That's an extreme example, but boy, doesn't that make the point.
Oh, it does. It does. Now, that was at a very high level, but this happens all the time at kids that are playing at a lot lower level.
Right.
They're on this team and the team is very successful. That's not good enough for them. They're on this team, they don't like the coach. Sometimes, here's the thing with the parent choosing the coach. When you choose the coach, maybe your kid is not playing enough. Maybe at that time, but this is important for the kid to have this experience of not playing enough so they can challenge and fight for that position. So that's one thing that you want to help your kid develop. The other thing is the coach might be a great coach. Your kid might be progressing along very well.
Right.
Just because they're not playing enough now, but they are progressing, they are getting better.
Right.
And you as a parent have to look at that and says, okay, the coach is doing very well, the kid is growing. Yes, they're not playing the minutes yet, but the kid has to learn to fight for those minutes.
So now I've got a question about community. If you've decided, first off, I think it's important for the CEO, for the Chief Encouraging Officer, to understand their child's passions.
Right.
So that we know that the kid actually wants to play soccer rather than guitar.
Right.
I mean, if his passion is to play guitar and you're putting him on a soccer field, something's going to be missing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So now we've got the kid that has a passion for the game, wants to play the game, and they're out there looking for the coach. Now, the community we live in is going to have the organizations that it has. At what point do you start weighing travel because maybe you think it's a better organization 30 miles away Where does that play into the equation?
Oh man, I've gotten this question so many times.
Okay, good.
Well, here's what happens, right? It depends on the age of the child. You have to look at the age of the child.
Okay.
Now, it takes a little while for you as a parent to figure out this person, number one, is very excited about the sport they're playing.
Gotcha.
They really want to do it. They're falling in love with it.
Right.
And then the other thing is, the hard part for the parent is usually finding out if this kid is talented or not.
Okay.
Because every parent thinks their kid is talented, right? I mean, that's just the way we are. So that's the hard part. But then
I know your kids are talented. I know my kid is talented.
Exactly. Everybody feels the same way. Now, between 8 and 12, it's not the time to take your kid, move your kid, 30 miles away.
Okay.
You have to. I've had so many parents who've done this, who've tried it.
Really?
Yeah, many times. You have other children. You're driving your kid an hour away somewhere.
Oh my goodness.
They're doing homework in the car. They're doing these kind of things. They're
Wow.
tired. They're fatigued.
Right.
When they get on the field, you're driving them an hour. You're driving them back home for another hour. They're training for an hour. That's 3 hours just for your kid to be playing on a certain team there. And the reality is, you don't even know if that's really going to help them progress in their development.
Right. So there's certainly a downside to the travel. I mean, I would expect that at these young ages, you're going to lose enthusiasm.
Right.
I mean, the youth has already decided to make this commitment, and the parent and the family has already made it.
The family is a very important point.
Right.
The other sibling are watching this.
That's right.
They're saying, okay, am I less important than this one?
Wow.
Why are you not paying? You're paying more attention
Interesting.
to this one. So
Yeah.
you have the other siblings involved. And then who's going to drive this kid? Is it going to be the father, the mom? Are you going to change roles? You're looking at people coming back from work, let's say 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
They're gone for 3 hours. So every week, one of the parents is going. Or even worse yet, then the parent would say to me like, well, no, we're going to put him in a carpool. Well,
Okay.
would you put your 12-year-old in a carpool with somebody else?
Right.
Even if it's a good friend, what if something happens?
Yeah. Probably
So
not.
there's a lot of factors that comes to play, and people are making these decisions just because of a soccer game,
Right.
and that doesn't make sense.
So how far along does that equation lessen, where now we have a youth whose development is reached a point where they're pretty good.
Right.
They love the game.
Right.
They enjoy going to practice.
Exactly.
They're really loving this thing. Now maybe a coach or a club that's 30 miles away might be a good idea. At what point does that happen?
I'd say when your kid starts to drive.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Because if somebody is willing to drive on their own,
Yeah. Oh
now
wow.
again, you have to look at all the factors, right?
Yep.
If they can drive on their own and they're willing to do that drive and go there and play, then that's a big deal. It doesn't mean you let them drive on their own. You could drive with them. That's
Sure,
fine.
sure.
But however, you have that facility capability, because a lot of the kids that start to get older, 16, 17, they can drive 25, 30 miles away and go to a practice. So yeah.
What other key issues are on your heart as far as the parents' involvement and the chief encouraging officer?
Well, those also you have, when we talk about games, but one of the things we didn't talk about is practices.
Gotcha.
You have parents that go to practices and scrutinize the practice.
Oh boy.
Everything the coach does is an issue. Everything their kid does is an issue. They're too involved. They have to really learn to detach and allow their children to flourish in that relationship. Allow their children to understand how to communicate with the coach.
So the chief encouraging officer has to delegate like any other CEO.
Just like anybody else.
Wow.
Just like if you go to a company, you look at that organization, the CEO is not doing everything.
Right.
I mean, the janitor doesn't do everything. The sales guy doesn't do everything. Everybody has a certain specific description.
Right.
Where it gets confusing for a parent is that because all these things, they kind of fall under that umbrella.
Sure. Yeah.
And as parents,
Yes.
we feel the responsibility to take it on.
Right.
But in reality, we do have to take a lot of things on.
All right. Well, but
there's a few things we can delegate.
And your experience is going to show, I mean, you're going to be able to see exactly what that particular parent is taking on just by looking at what they're doing on the sideline. If they got a baby in a buggy, and if they got, I mean, that whole thing, you're going to see them as either maybe it's a single dad,
Oh, yeah,
who doesn't have
everything.
who doesn't have a whole lot of things and just wants to live vicariously through their son.
Right, that happens.
You know,
that's for sure.
Which may not necessarily be a good relationship because maybe he wasn't all that successful and he wants his kid to excel.
Right. So there's a lot of that. I've had teams where I've had a parent that had 9 kids and other parents that had 5 kids. So balancing that relationship is a challenge. And then if they keep taking on things, they're going in too far into the kids, soccer and everything like that, not allowing the coach to actually work with their children,
right,
and train them and teach them and develop and help them to grow. That could be a big problem.
So I've always felt that the role of a sport coach has the potential of being an extremely profound individual in a person's life.
Oh, yeah.
Well into their adulthood.
Yes.
Whether or not they ever become a professional athlete.
That is correct. That is correct.
And only can that relationship thrive when the parent allows that by stepping back.
By stepping back and also developing a good relationship with that person.
Right.
So you have the parent. It's kind of it's a nice sandwich, right?
Yeah.
So you have the parent on one hand, and you have the teacher, the coach, whoever's on one hand.
Sure.
And you have the children. When it all works together, it tastes very good.
Nice.
When it doesn't work together, it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't taste very good.
And the story that you shared earlier of the parent that came to you with the children that were not doing well in school, and asking you to intercede in the way you can to make this to bring this whole thing together. I would imagine that same relationship goes the other direction too.
Correct.
Where the parent, where sometimes the coach is approaching the parent.
Exactly.
And talking back and forth.
Yep. And asking for help.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, and I've done it many, many times.
Really?
Because I don't think there's people that coach that just feel, okay, look, parents, you go here. I don't want to hear from the parents. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to do anything, and that's wrong.
Right.
And that's just way off because the parents are the key to me to helping this person succeed.
And I'm just thinking on that drive home from the game or that drive home from practice, that conversation that's being had in the car, where the parent or the chief encouraging officer is encouraging, focusing on the successes.
Right.
But then also there's going to be those conversations about the coach, what the coach did.
Right.
And for those to also be encouraging conversations.
Exactly.
If the parent has any negative feedback for the coach, take it up with the coach.
Yeah. Well, what happens is this: if a parent speaks negatively about a coach, that's their player, their children could never respect that coach.
And that's what we spoke about in our last episode.
Right. And then the other thing is, and then it goes to a next phase. The next phase is if you don't respect somebody, you're not going to learn anything from them.
Wow.
Your mind is not going to be open to receiving things. Most people are like that. Just think about it. Think of the people that you learn something from and you respect it. Usually it goes hand in hand.
Right.
When it's not like that, it doesn't happen.
Absolutely. Jacques Ladouceur, what a fascinating conversation.
Well, it's great. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. It's been great sharing with you today. This has been a passion of mine for such a long time. You can contact me in the email below and also purchase the books in the links below.